The Elder Scrolls is full of bad decisions, but none of them come close to the one guy who accidentally deleted his entire species from existence. One experiment, one strike of a hammer, and every single Dwemer on the planet vanished simultaneously. No bodies, no explanation, no survivors. Today I'm breaking down every tragic decision that shaped Tamriel's history, starting with the most catastrophically stupid science experiment ever conducted. Kagrenac striking the heart. Kagrenac was the Dwemer's chief tonal architect, which is a fancy way of saying he was the smartest engineer in a civilization of genius engineers. And what did he do with that intellect? He found the literal heart of a dead god buried under a volcano and thought, I can use this. The heart of Lorkhan wasn't some abstract magical battery. It was the divine core of the god who created mortality itself, just sitting there under Red Mountain like the world's most dangerous paperweight. Kagrenac built 3 tools to manipulate it: Sunder to strike it, Keening to focus its resonance, and Wraithguard, a gauntlet so the other 2 wouldn't kill him on contact, which is, not ideal as a safety feature. Nobody actually agrees on what he was trying to do. Some sources say he wanted to engineer godhood for the entire Dwemer race. Others say he was powering Numidium, a colossal brass god golem he built in secret. Either way, the man constructed a mechanical deity behind everyone's back and decided to plug a dead god's heart into it. Cool. In 1E700, at the Battle of Red Mountain, Kagrenac struck the heart, and every single Dwemer on Nirn vanished, simultaneously. Not just the ones in the room, every Dwemer everywhere gone in an instant, empty cities, automated defenses still running, 0 bodies, 0 explanation. The leading theory comes from a Skyrim quest called Arniel's Endeavor. A mage replicates Kagrenac's experiment on a smaller scale using Keening and a warped soul gem. The moment he strikes it, his soul gets absorbed into the nearest available vessel, which happens to be you. Now scale that up. When Kagrenac struck the heart, the nearest soul gem in metaphysical terms was Numidium itself. The entire Dwemer race, absorbed into the golem. Still alive, possibly. Still conscious, maybe. Trapped inside a broken brass god for thousands of years. I don't know what to tell you. Kagrenac treated a dead god's heart like a car battery and paid the highest price imaginable. Not just his own life, but the existence of everyone who shared his blood. The ultimate rationalist, undone by the one variable he couldn't account for, that some things aren't meant to be engineered. But if you think accidentally erasing your own species is bad, wait until you hear what happened to the people who picked up Kagrenac's tools after him, because Azura made sure they'd never forget it. Azura cursing the Chimer. So Kagrenac's strike erases an entire race from existence. That's the mechanical side of Red Mountain, but the spiritual fallout is somehow worse. After the battle, Nerevar's 3 most trusted counselors, Vivec, Almalexia, and Sothasil, are left holding Kagrenac's tools. Nerevar made them swear an oath. Don't use the tools on the heart. Consult Azura first. Simple instructions. They break every single one. Nerevar dies under circumstances that are suspiciously convenient for the 3 people who wanted godhood. The official story changes depending on who you ask, but hidden messages encoded within Vivec's own 36 lessons appear to be a straight-up confession, buried in acrostic text, like a serial killer leaving clues in a crossword puzzle. The tribunal seizes the tools, taps into the heart of Lorkhan, and steals divine power. 3 mortals become living gods overnight. Azura disagrees with this arrangement. In 1E700, she appears before the tribunal, and her punishment isn't aimed at just the 3 traitors. It hits everyone, every single Chimer on Nirn. Their golden skin turns ash gray. Their eyes turn blood red. The Chimer cease to exist. The Dunmer are born. An entire race's physical identity, rewritten as divine spite. That's what makes this decision gut-wrenching. The tribunal betrayed Nerevar. 3 people made that choice. But Azura's curse doesn't discriminate. The farmer who never held a weapon. The child born 3 days before. The elder who openly opposed the tribunal's power grab. All transformed. Collective punishment on a racial scale. Handed down by a god who's supposed to represent twilight and transition, not wrath. She also drops a prophecy. Nerevar will return as the Nerevarine and destroy the tribunal's stolen godhood, which is, not ideal for Vivec and friends. This single prophecy becomes the entire plot of Morrowind thousands of years later. Azura plays the long game like nobody else. Here's where it gets complicated. The Dunmer don't just accept the curse as punishment. They convert it into identity. Ash skin becomes resilience. Red eyes become ancestral memory. They build an entire culture around hardiness, ancestor worship, and fierce independence, turning divine punishment into cultural pride. It's genuinely impressive, but the foundational trauma never fully heals. It echoes through the Red Year, through the Argonian invasion, through every catastrophe that follows. Azura's curse is both righteous and monstrous. She's correct that the tribunal committed an unforgivable betrayal. Stolen godhood is an abomination, but punishing millions for the sins of 3? That's not justice. That's a tantrum with the power of a god behind it. At least with Azura, the punishment stays on one race. The next decision reshapes the metaphysical rules for the entire continent, and it starts with a slave who made a deal with a dragon, Alessia's Covenant. This is probably the most well-intentioned decision on this entire list, and that's exactly what makes it so devastating. Alessia was a slave, a Nedic woman living under the Ayleid regime, which, if you're not familiar, was essentially an empire of elven lords who worshipped Daedric princes and practiced human sacrifice as a hobby. We're talking about a civilization that kept humans as cattle for ritual slaughter. So when Alessia rises up, rallies her people, and overthrows Ayleid rule at the White Gold Tower in 1E243, founding the first human empire of Cyrodiil, that's genuinely heroic. A freed slave building a nation from nothing. Hard to argue with that. But here's where the tragedy starts. Alessia knows that the Daedra are the problem. Her people were tortured under Daedric influence for generations, and she needs a way to make sure it never happens again, not just for her lifetime, but forever. So she prays to Akatosh, the dragon god of time, and Akatosh responds in the most metal way possible. He rips a burning handful of his own heart's blood from his chest and gives it to her. From this, the Amulet of Kings is created. The deal is simple. A dragonborn emperor wears the amulet, lights the dragon fires in the Temple of the One, and this maintains something called the liminal barrier, basically a cosmic wall that prevents Daedra from freely entering the mortal world. 3,000 years of protection. Humanity safe from oblivion. Beautiful system. Except she accidentally built a kill switch into reality. The entire defense of the mortal world now rests on one bloodline, one artifact, and one ritual. If any single piece fails, the barrier collapses. It's the most catastrophic single point of failure in the history of Tamriel, and nobody notices because it works perfectly for over 3,000 years. Then, in 3E433, the Mythic Dawn assassinates Emperor Uriel Septim VII and his heirs in a single coordinated strike. The amulet is stolen, the dragonfires go dark, and just like that, Mehrunes Dagon starts ripping holes in reality, pouring Daedra through oblivion gates across the entire continent. 3 millennia of protection, undone in one night of assassinations. Martin Septim, the last illegitimate heir, eventually saves the world by shattering the Amulet of Kings and merging with Akatosh himself to banish Dagon, which is heroic and all, but it also permanently destroys the system Alessia built. The amulet is gone, the Septim dynasty is over, the Covenant is finished. A freed slave tried to protect humanity forever and accidentally created the exact vulnerability that would one day nearly destroy it. The structure was beautiful. It contained its own destruction, and the worst part is, she probably had no alternative. Without the Covenant, the Daedra would have reasserted control within a generation. She made the only choice available to her, and it was still, ultimately, a trap. But if you think building a kill switch into the fabric of reality is bad, wait until you hear about the Snow Elf priest who decided to weaponize the sun because his god didn't return his calls. Vurthur submitting to the curse. This is, without exaggeration, pettiest apocalypse attempt in Elder Scrolls history, and I need you to understand the full scope of what happens here, because it's genuinely unhinged. Arch-Curate Vurthur was one of the highest-ranking Snow Elf priests serving Auriel in the Chantry of the Forgotten Vale. His entire existence revolved around divine purity and spiritual devotion. He was, for all intents and purposes, the Pope of the Snow Elves, closest thing to a direct line to God. Then, he gets infected with vampirism. Now, here's where it gets dark. His own cult's purity doctrine immediately turns against him. His people are revolted. And Auriel, complete silence. No divine intervention, no cure, no acknowledgement whatsoever. To Vurthur, this isn't just an illness. It's a betrayal. His god abandoned him the moment he became inconvenient. And look, vampirism can be cured in the Elder Scrolls universe. Vurthur could have sought a cure. He could have accepted his condition quietly and lived out his centuries in exile. Instead, he looks at this situation and thinks, I'm going to make the sun go away forever, which is, a proportional response. He engineers the tyranny of the sun prophecy from scratch. The plan requires Auriel's bow, an artifact tied directly to his former god, and the blood of a daughter of Coldharbour. If these elements combine correctly, the sun gets permanently blotted out. No more daylight, ever. Agriculture collapses, ecosystems die, mortal civilization crumbles, all because one priest got sick and felt abandoned. But here's the kicker. This plan requires patience, measured in eras. Vurthur sits in his frozen temple for thousands of years, waiting for someone powerful enough enough to attempt it, that someone turns out to be Lord Harkon of Clan Volkihar in the 4th Era, who becomes so fixated on the prophecy that he tears his own family apart pursuing it. The patience is what makes Vurthur genuinely terrifying. This isn't a hot-blooded revenge fantasy. This is a cold, multi-millennia engineering project designed to punish a god by destroying everything that God's light touches. In his own words, Auriel himself may have been beyond my reach, but his influence on our world wasn't. Then there's the fan debate that makes this even weirder. The Tyranny of the Sun prophecy appears encoded in an Elder Scroll. Elder Scrolls exist outside linear time. They record events retrocausally, so it's entirely possible that Vurthur originated the prophecy, but chronologically it was present in the scroll before he created it. A causal loop where revenge and destiny generate each other. Time is fake, and this elf is petty, beyond the boundaries of space-time itself. The whole thing almost works too. If the Dragonborn sides with Harkon, Nirn goes dark. Permanently. Thousands of years of theological spite fulfilled because one man decided that if his god wouldn't save him, nobody gets to enjoy the sun. But if you think one angry priest is disturbing, wait until you hear about a god who tried to replace the heart of the world with clockwork, Sotha, Syl's Clockwork City. This is the quietest tragedy on the list. No curse, no battlefield, no dramatic vanishing act. Just a god who slowly closed the door to his workshop and never came back out. After ascending to godhood alongside Almalexia and Vivek by tapping the heart of Lorkhan, Sotha Sil does what any reasonable person with infinite power and a genius-level intellect would do. He decides to fix the entire universe. Not metaphorically, literally. He builds the Clockwork City, a hidden artificial realm that recreates Nirn in mechanical form. Every plant, every animal, every natural process, rebuilt from scratch in metal and gears as a perfected model of reality. His stated goal is the redemption of Tamriel, eliminating chaos, entropy, and Daedric interference by engineering a self-sufficient reality that doesn't need any of it, which is, not a small ask. At the core of the whole thing sits the Throne Aligned, also called the Mainspring Everwound, the central mechanism powering the entire Clockwork City, designed to replicate and eventually replace the laws governing Nirn itself. Sotha Sil recognizes that the Tribunal's reliance on Lorkhan's original heart is a vulnerability, especially with Dagoth Ur corrupting it beneath Red Mountain. So his solution is to build something that transcends that dependency entirely. A better system, one he controls. But here's the thing nobody talks about. This is exactly what Lorkhan did. An ambitious entity looks at the cosmos, decides it's broken, and attempts to resolve the fundamental tensions of existence through a constructed world. Sotha Sil is repeating the original sin of creation in a new form, except this time with brass fittings and better documentation. The personal cost is devastating in the most mundane way possible. He just stops showing up. His increasing isolation leaves Almalexia without a moderating presence, and she begins unraveling. The Tribunal, which functioned as a unit for thousands of years, falls apart because one member decided his workshop was more important than his family. And Almalexia, increasingly unhinged and paranoid, eventually walks into the Clockwork City and murders him in his own domain, surrounded by his life's work. The worst part? By the time the Nerevarine arrives in the Tribunal expansion, Sotha Sil is already dead. You never meet him alive. You find his corpse, suspended in his own machinery like a discarded component. The god who built a perfect world couldn't even protect himself inside it. Almalexia's grand act of betrayal happened off-screen, in silence, in a place nobody else could reach. But even in death, his creation becomes a liability. The Clockwork City draws attention from Daedric princes like nocturnal and mortal factions who recognize what it represents, a new kind of leverage over reality itself. By trying to build something that would protect the world from outside interference, Sotha Sil created the single most attractive target for outside interference, a new cosmic vulnerability, wrapped in brass, sitting in a pocket dimension with zero security budget. He wanted to save everyone. He ended up alone, murdered by someone who loved him, leaving behind an invention that might destroy everything he was trying to protect, not with a bang. Just a quiet god in a quiet room, tinkering until the silence swallowed him whole. But if you think a god dying alone in his workshop is tragic, wait until you hear about a king who trusted the wrong artifact and accidentally broke time itself. Lili Zandis, trusting the totem. Every other entry on this list involves gods, cosmic engineering, or reality-altering magic wielded by beings who should have known better. This one is just a king who thought he was playing politics. King Lysandus of Daggerfall ruled during the late Third Era, when the Iliac Bay region was a mess of feudal backstabbing and territorial disputes. He fought wars over islands, commanded loyalty through force and reputation, and by by all accounts, was a competent ruler in an era that chewed through incompetent ones. But competence in regional politics means absolutely nothing when the artifact on your desk can break time itself. Here's where Lysandus makes his mistake. He becomes entangled with the Totem of Tiber Septim, an artifact specifically designed to control Numidium, the brass god golem that Tiber Septim used to crush his enemies into submission. The Underking wants it back. The Emperor wants it for imperial consolidation. And Lysandus, for reasons that can only be described as catastrophically optimistic, decides to involve himself in this particular game of chess. He trusted the wrong alliance. He thought he could leverage Numidium's legacy for regional advantage, like bringing a nuclear warhead to a knife fight and assuming you'd get to choose when it goes off. He didn't. Lord Woodbourne assassinates him, not in some grand betrayal on a battlefield, but as part of the broader scramble for the totem, a capable king reduced to a political casualty in someone else's scheme, and his spirit doesn't rest. Lysandus becomes a wrathful ghost haunting Daggerfall, screaming for vengeance across the city. His tomb lies in Menevia, nowhere near where he actually died in Anticlear. He can't even haunt the right location. But the real tragedy isn't his ghost. It's what happens next. The totem eventually falls into the player's hands in Daggerfall, and each faction it's delivered to produces a different ending where Numidium activates under different control. All of those endings are canon, every single one. Because activating Numidium triggers a localized dragon break, the warp in the west, where multiple contradictory timelines happen simultaneously and then collapse into one stable outcome. The Iliac Bay goes from dozens of petty kingdoms to a handful of consolidated powers overnight, or across no time at all. Time itself stops cooperating. Lysandus trusted an alliance tied to an artifact that literally breaks reality when you turn it on. Kings, who won, also lost. Factions that were destroyed also conquered. And Lysandus? He's remembered as a tragic pawn, a ruler whose personal ambitions intersected with forces so far beyond his comprehension he might as well have been a medieval lord trying to negotiate with a particle accelerator. No gods cursed him. No cosmic engineers betrayed him. He just trusted the wrong people about an artifact he didn't understand, and it cost him his life, his rest, and his kingdom's place in a coherent timeline, which is, not ideal. But if you think a king accidentally helping break regional space-time is bad, wait until you hear about the guy who deliberately wrote a book designed to end the entire world. Mankar Cameron's Commentaries. Most of the decisions on this list involve swords, or gods, or ancient artifacts being swung at hearts that probably should have been left alone. This one involves a guy sitting down and writing a book, and somehow, that's the one that nearly ends the world. Here's the thing about the Mysterium Xarxes. It's a forbidden artifact created from the essence of Mehrunes Dagon himself. It's singular, it's dangerous, and on its own, it's basically useless as a recruitment tool. You can't build a movement around one cursed book that melts your brain if you look at it wrong. Mankar Cameron understood this, so he didn't try to spread the Xarxes itself. He wrote 4 volumes of commentaries that translated Dagon's apocalyptic doctrine into something accessible, something persuasive, something you could hand to a literate citizen and watch them slowly become a terrorist. And I cannot stress enough how insane his cosmology is. According to Mankar's writings, Tamriel isn't a mortal realm at all. It's a stolen Daedric plane called Dawn's Beauty. The Aedra are false gods who murdered Lorcan and usurped his creation, trapping mortals in a decaying prison. Mehrunes Dagon isn't a destroyer in this framework. He's a liberator, concerned brother sent to reclaim what was taken and free everyone from Aedric tyranny, which is, a pretty compelling pitch if you don't think about it too hard. The commentaries function as both theological doctrine and instruction manual. They contain encoded directions to the mythic Dawn's hidden shrine. They lay out the cult's beliefs in escalating detail across 4 volumes, each one pulling the reader deeper. By the time someone finishes all 4, they're not a curious scholar anymore. They're a true believer ready to die for the cause, and die they do. The mythic Dawn follows these texts to assassinate Emperor Uriel Septim VII, steal the Amulet of Kings, and crack open the barriers between Oblivion and Mundus. Oblivion gates start appearing across Tamriel. Daedra pour through. Cities burn. The entire Third Era effectively ends because a cult leader wrote really convincing fanfiction about his favorite Daedric prince. Meanwhile, Mankar retreats into a pocket dimension he calls Paradise, a personal realm created through the Xarxes' power. You can only reach it by correctly interpreting his commentaries, which is either brilliant contingency planning or the most pretentious security system ever devised. Oh, you want to stop me? Better be a close reader. What makes Mankar genuinely tragic rather than just evil is the nature of his weapon. He's not a warrior. He's not a god. He's an intellectual whose written interpretation of a text becomes the catalyst for a world-ending war. The commentaries are radicalization literature, plain and simple. They take a singular dangerous artifact and democratize its ideology, converting readers into willing participants in an apocalyptic conspiracy. One man's exegesis kills an emperor, ends a dynasty, and nearly hands the entire mortal plane to a Daedric prince of destruction. I I don't know what to tell you. Sometimes the pen really is mightier than the sword, especially when the pen is dipped in the metaphysical blood of a god who wants to burn everything down. But if Mankar's decision shattered an empire from within, the next one shattered one from the outside, and the man who signed it had to live with what it cost. The White Gold Concordat. By 4E 171, the empire is a shell of what it used to be. The Oblivion Crisis gutted its leadership, the Septim bloodline is gone, and the provinces are held together by tradition more than actual strength. The Aldmeri Dominion knows this, so they deliver an ultimatum to Emperor Titus Mede to ban Talos worship, disband the Blades, hand over a massive chunk of southern Hammerfell. Basically, kneel or we'll make you kneel. Titus Mede II says no. And here's where the tragedy starts, because that refusal kicks off the Great War. The Thalmor call it the First War Against the Empire, which is a fun little detail. They're numbering these like sequels. The Dominion invades Cyrodiil, pushes deep into the Heartland, and captures the Imperial City itself, the capital of the Empire, sacked by Elven supremacists. Titus Mede II eventually retakes it in a desperate counterattack that costs him nearly everything, and by 4E 175, both sides are exhausted. Done. So on the 11th of Sun's dusk, 4E 175, Titus Mede II signs the White Gold Concordat. The terms? Ban Talos worship across the entire empire, disband the Blades, cede southern Hammerfell to the Dominion, and if those sound familiar, they should, because they're nearly identical to the ultimatum he rejected before the war started. Tens of thousands dead, the Imperial City sacked and rebuilt, years of brutal conflict, and the end result is the same piece of paper he could have signed on day one. The war accomplished nothing except filling graves. But here's where it gets complicated. Some argue Titus needed to fight, that accepting without resistance would have shown the Empire was tothless, inviting immediate further aggression, that the Battle of the Red Ring at least proved the Empire could still hurt the Dominion, making the Concordat a mutual ceasefire rather than a surrender. Others say that's cope, that he gambled with thousands of lives and accepted the exact same deal anyway. The fallout is immediate. Hammerfell looks at the terms, says absolutely not, and keeps fighting the Dominion alone. They eventually force the elves to withdraw without Imperial help, which is honestly embarrassing for everyone involved. Then Hammerfell formally secedes from the Empire. The treaty designed to hold things together starts breaking them apart. Meanwhile, the Talos ban becomes a powder keg. Thalmor justiciars drag people from their homes for worshipping a god they've prayed to their entire lives. In Skyrim, this becomes the grievance. Ulfric's Stormcloak builds an entire rebellion on it. The Empire's own subjects now view their government as Thalmor puppets, which, given that the Thalmor have literal enforcement networks inside Imperial borders, isn't entirely unfair. There's even a fan theory that Titus Mede II arranges his own assassination through the Dark Brotherhood, the idea being that his name is permanently stained by the Concordat, so he engineers a death that makes him a martyr. It's unconfirmed, but the way he behaves during that questline, calm, resigned, almost relieved, lends it some weight, and that's what makes this the perfect entry to end on. Every other decision on this list has a clear answer. Kagrenac shouldn't have struck the heart. Azura's curse was disproportionate. Mankar Camoran was a fanatic. Titus Mede II? Reasonable people genuinely disagree. Was he a pragmatic strategist buying time to rebuild? Or a weak emperor whose signature domed everything the Septims built? The only thing that's not debatable is the math. He said no, people died, and then he said yes. Anyway, sometimes the most tragic decision isn't the wrong one. It's the one you already turned down. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.